It's going to be a monumental task.
I'm sitting here going, here we go again.
This Congress is a once-in-a-generation Congress.
If you can't agree that there shouldn't be fraud.
The federal government is just riddled with companies that have taken advantage of us.
Look, I would love if we could get a full 4 years, but I know we got 2.
You can have the best policy in the world, but if no one's paying attention, it doesn't matter. Okay, make America great again. That's what the president said.
I have a lot more faith in this administration.
But we've got to cut the umbilical cord from the last administration and all the waste and all the fraud there.
All of that sounds great, but it also sounds like all executive branch.
But we overreacted in Congress.
I'm going to trust, but I want to be able to verify.
If we don't have those out by July 31st, then that is a very bad sign.
Okay.
All right, everyone, real quick. So last week we had a very interesting conversation with Senator Rand Paul where he explained why he was voting against the continuing resolution. Today we're talking to Senator Markwayne Mullin, who explains why he voted yes for it. And he gets to go into all the various details on why he thinks it was the correct vote. But most importantly, he's actually going to give us insight into the very things that we need to be looking for and tracking to make sure that Congress actually does its job. I hope you like it.
Senator Mullin, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. This is going to get a pretty wonky conversation. So, well, you can laugh and have a good time on most of this.
Yeah.
This one's going to get deep.
You have developed a reputation for being the guy that can explain not just congressional wonk, but Senate wonk, which is a higher level of wonk. You know, people don't want to understand what's going on.
That's because my vocabulary is very small. Went to school in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I have this tendency, if I can't spell it, I don't use it.
Yeah, there you go.
DOGE is really easy for me to speak. And so let's talk about what led us to this point of wasteful spending to begin with.
Yeah.
So State of the Union, or really it was a joint session. The difference between the president, when he first comes in office, can't technically deliver a State of the Union, so it was a joint session. The president gets up and he reads all this wasteful spending that that they've identified through DOGE, right?
Yeah.
Well, you and I, being business people plus being in a political office, the first thing you sit there and you look at it, you go, okay, well, we're standing up and clapping, right? But why? Because we control the purse strings. Congress controls the purse strings. So why is it that DOGE is identifying and we're not?
Now, as much as we're enjoying this conversation, one of the things that we've all learned when it comes to politics is you can trust, but you always got to verify. And that is where Ground News comes in. So I've gone right over here to Ground News and I've typed in news from the Department of Government Efficiency. And right off the bat, I'm able to get a look at some of the trending articles which are taking place. For instance, like this one, where Maxine Waters floats the idea of deporting Melania Trump in an anti-DOGE diatribe. This allows me to go on and get all of the highlights from left, center, and right. What are people talking about? Who's covering the news and who's not covering the news? Now, Ground News is a website and an app that gathers related articles in one place so you can compare headlines, helping you to understand not just what's happening, but who's telling the story and why. Because the bottom line is that it's important to make sure that we are covering all of these stories from multiple perspectives. And you can do the same thing by going to ground.news/Doge, where you'll get 40% off their Vantage plan in order to keep track of what's actually going on. That's ground.news/Doge for 40% off that Vantage plan. Let's get back to the discussion.
So here's the issue with that. In 1997, 96, whenever the Gingrich New Deal with America came out, they essentially did away with earmarks.
Yeah.
Which earmarks have been labeled as bad things because, right, the bridge to nowhere, that's what people think about. But when you're doing your budget in the state, you guys have line item appropriations. Mm-hmm. In the state, in city, and in county, they have line item appropriations. Federal, we don't. Mm-hmm. Because when we took away what the public received as earmarks, we took away also line item appropriations, because earmarks is line item appropriations.
Yeah.
They were getting abused, but when that happens, we started bundling. And when we bundle, we give it to the administration. Let's just say we give the Department of Defense $285 billion, right? I'm not picking on, I'm just saying.
Sure, yeah.
We all thought $285 billion for defense, but we can't actually tell them how to spend it. We can make suggestions for it. Same thing with the Corps of Engineers. We can make suggestions for it. So technically, they come to us, give us their budget, give us their projects, and that's how we come up with the amount of money to spend it. But they can actually spend it however they want to. Technically, that money at that point is allocated for that amount of money to be spent because it's been authorized.
Yeah.
Now, What DOGE has done is they went in and they've identified all this stuff, and they're able to pull most of it back, except this $2 billion with the court. Why is the court kicked back this $2 billion and not this other, over $200 billion? Well, because Congress also hasn't reauthorized a lot of programs and departments with inside agencies. So Elon and I had this conversation actually Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. When I say early Saturday morning, it was like 1 a.m. He's like President Trump. I'm not sure he sleeps. So we were having this conversation about how to identify programs that are unauthorized, because technically Congress didn't directly authorize that, and agencies that are unauthorized. When they're unauthorized, then the president can send it back to us in what they call a rescission package. When they give it back to us, we have 45 days to act. If Congress doesn't act, then it's kind of like the president not signing the bill. It automatically goes in. He doesn't have to, if he doesn't do anything, it automatically goes through. If he vetoes it, it comes back. If we do nothing, it becomes law, and then that's Congress speaking by saying we authorized it.
Okay.
If when it comes back to us and we take a vote to say no, it's not spent that way, then the president can't re-spend it, say on money to build the wall.
Sure.
It has to be resent to the treasurer.
So if I get this all right, you guys allocate a broad amount of money for an executive branch agency, right? It's like
appropriation.
Yeah. So it's just, there you go. Here's your bucket of money, and we think you should spend it on these various things. But ultimately, the executive branch ends up having a lot of discretion, or the department ends up having a lot of discretion. DOGE goes in, finds a bunch of line items that they're actually spending, because they got to be somewhat transparent. They say, hey, this is not. But because Congress still has the overall authorization for allocating of funds, it's got to go back to, you can go back to you guys in the form of a rescission, and then you guys have 45 days at that point to say yes, no. Like, how does that, okay, so for instance, because a lot of people are asking right now as they look at this continuing resolution, hey, we're just going to freeze spending, and people are like, wait a second, why are we freezing it? Why don't we just cut all this stuff? Why don't we do it that way? So what's preventing that from happening right now?
So three separate things are working right now.
Okay.
Right. So you had the budget, which is what the House passed, $4.5 trillion, extended tax cuts to eight years, and did roughly about $2 trillion worth of cuts.
Okay.
That's one. What the budget does is it just sets top lines for the appropriating committee, which there's 12 appropriation bills, top lines for the appropriation bills to find their funding within it.
Okay.
It's below funding, which is the $200 billion, and they have to find cuts, which those are called 301Bs, I think. And then we have to cut those. And then we have FY25, which is what the CR is, right? So the CR is a complete separate deal. So reconciliation will go towards FY26.
Okay.
Our fiscal year starts in October 1st in September 30th. So we don't run calendar, we start September 30th.
Yeah.
So we're 6 months through FY25. President Biden, unfortunately, left us this mess to clean up. When they left office, when they knew they had lost the election November 5th, they started spending FY25. Because remember, the dollars were put in September 30th. We did a continued resolution. Then we did another continued resolution in December. Yeah. That went through basically where we're at this Friday on the 14th. Mm-hmm. What they did, though, is they went in and they front-loaded and spent a lot of the money. Okay. So there's not money there to cut. Got it. So if you were to take DOGE and say, let's apply it to this, it's not just 6 months of the year that's already gone. They front loaded all the money up front. So a lot of what DOGE is doing on a lot of these agencies is they're going back and reclaim it. So you recently saw $80 billion coming back from FEMA. Yeah. That was part of the money that they hadn't spent. And so they went and called it back and brought it back. We can do stuff with it, but we have to finish FY25, which is why we have to do this continuing resolution, which I don't like. We're going to turn it into a funding bill, fund it through September 30th, and then start looking at FY26 and start applying all the DOGE cuts to FY26, because then we have a full fiscal year to actually cut, and we control it. So you have to do CR, which I told you this is going to get wonky. Yeah. We have to do CR, cut the umbilical cord from the Biden administration, say goodbye with you, get away from them, not keep fighting over them, start focus on Trump's administration, set the budget, start with FY26, move forward, put the cuts in there, put the tax cuts in there, and then start balancing our budget. And we'll get it balanced at the rate we're going before, I think there's a possibility Possibility.
Yeah.
Not saying it'll happen. By possibility, we do it and we could balance the budget in FY27.
So if I understand it correctly, the whole purpose of the CR at this point is, like you said, it's to basically kind of encapsulate the Biden years and the budgets that took place during the Biden years, completely separated going forward. So you do the CR right now. It might not be what anyone likes to do, but it at least makes a clean break between the Biden years and the Trump years going forward. And then on the Trump years, now you have a clean slate by which you can utilize DOGE recommendations, carry the proper legislation, and do all the things necessary. Okay, so here's my next question on that. One of the things we've talked a lot about on DOGE Watch is, again, this idea that a lot of what's happened right now that everyone's happy about is just identify and freeze. What do you see as like the top priorities for Congress to focus on with respect to making the sort of budget changes or structural changes that doesn't just get rid of the wasteful spending that we're currently seeing, but changes things going forward so we don't get a repeat of it, right? We don't want a DOGE to be uncovering the same things year after year after year. So what is Congress's role, the Senate's role in making that sort of structural change?
Well, that's where rescission comes into place.
Okay.
If we pick it up and we pass law to say, yes, this isn't what we want to get done, not yes, this is what we want to do. If you're silent, it says yes.
Yeah.
If we vote on it, it says we actually do want to cut it. It becomes law and it can't go back in.
Okay.
So before they can go back and spend the money, they will have to come back and say, we want to spend this money for this program again. Congress will have to pass it. It won't get passed. So there's a difference between just cutting it and changing policy through executive order and actually making it law. So rescission lets us make it into law.
But even then, you're pulling it back and then essentially reallocating it for a more specified purpose.
The rescission part will probably go back to Treasurer.
Okay.
Now, what I have wanted to do is take the money that we cut through rescission, and instead of taking it to the treasurer, we actually instruct the treasurer to take the money and put it directly towards paying off our debt. So instead of us just servicing credit card interest,
okay,
we're actually start paying off the credit card.
So this would be okay, but that's still this process of the money's been allocated, and now we're finding ways that we didn't want it to be allocated and pulling it back.
Which is why we got to bring back line item appropriation.
So basically the structural change that you would recommend on this is that what you're saying right now is that at least when you have the line item, amendments, at least you know who was doing it and for what reasons. Now you're just handing basically a huge bucket of money to an executive branch agency, and they're doing a lot of things with it that we would never otherwise allow.
But let me put it this way. Are you able to carry debt in your state legislature?
Yes.
Okay. But doesn't have to balance at the end of the year?
Yes.
Right. Every state does.
Yeah.
In our federal government, we don't have to. So when you start doing line item, we call it line item appropriations. You guys call it line item budgeting. Is that what you said?
Line item budget amendments. Yeah.
So when you're doing line item budget amendment, it has to fit within the number that is fit. And so
we have to have a balanced budget.
Yeah, that number is fixed.
Yeah.
You can't go over that.
Yeah.
Well, if we go to the president wanting to make a balanced budget, the only way we can keep that number from floating, because what's another $100 million here or $100 million here or $5 million here for this project, for this test? I mean, if we want DOD to run a test on something, it's $5 million just like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't even have to really be hardly voted on.
Yeah.
You can make that request because $5 million is, in the budget we're dealing with, they literally consider it just rounding dust.
Yeah.
So when you start doing actual line item appropriations, now every single dollar is accounted for and you know exactly where it comes from. And you're talking about transparency.
Yeah.
We just came out of 4 years of Biden.
Yeah.
The last 16 years, only 4 has been controlled by a Republican. 12 has been controlled by a Democrat. So for 12 of those 16 years, even a Republican Congress has bubbled money, gave it to a Democrat president and said, spend it however you want. That's why we got all this woke money being spent in these agencies that we wasn't even aware of.
So what sort of safeguards do you think could be put in place? So if the structural change with respect to greater transparency in spending and making sure that we're reducing waste is to actually bring back the line items, are there other mechanisms that could be put in place to prevent the things that cause people to hate earmarks and line items in the first place?
You got to balance it.
Okay.
That's the biggest safeguard because then you don't have that slush money to spend. I mean, if it bounces, what keeps you guys guarded in your state?
Yeah.
Is because you only have so much money to spend. You can't print money.
Yeah.
You can print money.
Yeah.
You can't print money in Oklahoma, right? You can only print it in our federal currency. So if you have a balanced budget and you're sticking to that, then all those pet projects can't go in there. However, most districts and most states will be able to receive their priorities that's actual considered for federal funding, not namesake stuff.
Yeah.
Not because I want my name and I want a legacy on a building, which is what has happened a lot. Now you don't see these buildings go up anymore. So you don't see Pelosi's building in San Francisco, right? You don't see all these bridges being named after congressmen and after senators anymore, because that was a new contract with America. You know, that's what stopped that. But we overreacted in Congress, and we took away all of it.
So, for instance, I've said this before when people ask me the difference between the Virginia legislature and Congress. I say there's a couple of things that save us in the state legislature that are not restrictions on Congress. I said, once, it is constitutionally mandated that we balance our budget. So that keeps us within certain limitations. 2, we can't print money. Which means we got to work with what we got. And 3 was germaneness issues, which is, one issue per bill. It's like, I can't, now the budget works a little bit differently.
Right.
But on individual bills, I can't entice you to vote for my bill on a very specific topic by adding something to it that has nothing to do with that topic. But that is something that can still happen here on Congress. So do you think it would be sufficient to have something like a balanced budget amendment or some other sort of rules that were followed as a result, combined with things like one issue per bill?
You could. I think it would be more difficult when you do one issue per bill because it's much bigger. So I don't know if you can do one issue per bill, but if you did a balanced budget, just start there. The president came in with a promise to do things different for America, and so he's delivering on that promise. I mean, he says all the time, promises made, promises kept.
Yep.
So for him, he's like, no, it's wasteful. We don't have to keep doing this. And they're trying to be accountable to the executive branch. Congress is who they're supposed to be accountable for because we appropriate the dollars.
Yeah.
So if we start appropriating the dollars in line item and we have a budget to where we can't go over because this is, or we're going to have a balanced budget, then those agencies become more accountable to the American people. Why? Because the bureaucrats who are unelected have to come back and ask for every single penny to the people that the American people elect. This Congress is a once-in-a-generation Congress. I mean that. The 119th Congress, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do something because it's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Policy isn't always the best outcome. It's the timing of the policy that is important. You know this, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you can have the best policy in the world, but if no one's paying attention, it doesn't matter. The timing is right. Because the American people are paying attention to it. They're fed up. The president's approval ratings are still high. They're tired of the government being overreaching. They're tired of the government running this huge debt. And the debt has become such a big thing that it's become a topic constantly from people. So if there's a time to actually set the standard and then make the 120th Congress or the 121st Congress or the 122nd to actually break it, if the 119th can actually balance the budget, I say we're going to hold to this, and we're not having to cut Medicare or Social Security benefits. We're not having to cut those benefits, but we're reforming the program so they're there for a long period of time and getting the waste and fraud out of it.
Well, I don't think most people have a problem with, when President Trump is talking about the fraud, waste, and abuse within Social Security. And you can't even get Democrats to cheer for, I'm glad we identified all of these people who have to be dead, who are taking up Social Security benefits. When you can't even applaud that, that demonstrates to me that, you're not even concerned. Forget what you think about the overall program and how it's been run. If you can't agree that there shouldn't be fraud and abuse within the program, and you can't understand that the money that gets wasted on fraud and abuse is money that cannot be utilized for recipients, like legal recipients, then we're just at a point right now where it's just, petulant and transigence. But I'm listening to all this, and I'm not going to lie, I was frustrated by some of the stuff when President Trump and the House Freedom Caucus, everyone else came out and said, well, we're going to go with this CR, we're going to freeze stuff. I'm sitting here going, here we go again. Now, the difference is, I have a lot more faith in this administration. I have a lot more faith in some of the members that have stepped forward and said, look, we don't like it either, but there were things beyond our control. Now we're fixing it and moving forward. 2 questions. The first one is, okay, fine. We trust that you're going to get it done. What can you do between, now and then? Because it can't just be, okay, well, nothing's going to happen, but trust us, in September we'll do it. What are the other structural things or legislative things that could take place?
Talk about FY25 specifically.
Yeah.
So I'll make this comparison. I tell everybody make decisions based on two things: the way you're raised, and your life experience. So my life experience, much like yours, isn't politics.
Yeah.
If it was, I'd probably be much different. I don't know. Still amazed I got elected office. I guess I just didn't go home and talk to enough people. But business is my mindset.
Yeah.
So I go in and I buy a company, right? We bought a lot of companies, my wife and I, in the past. And a lot of times you're buying a company, it's got a lot of debt.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't control the money that was already spent. Now I can go renegotiate some of the contracts that I had to inherit from that. Now, they're not obligated to renegotiate it, but if they want my business moving forward, they'll renegotiate.
Okay.
So with FY25, we do need to cut the umbilical cord. Like we bought the company, it was failing. We're going to make it successful. We're going to make America successful again, make America great again. That's what the president said. But we've got to cut the umbilical cord from the last administration and all the waste and all the fraud there. Stop the bleeding, start planning forward for FY26. But in FY25, we're going to continue to dig in and find the savings. That's where DOGE is going to play an important role. So we don't repeat those same mistakes in FY26. We're going to go in and renegotiate contracts. The president is the guy who renegotiated contracts. Remember what he did with Air Force One?
Yeah.
It went from $5 billion to $1.8 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, still an unfathomable amount of money, but still yet. That's how much they can cut off these contracts. The federal government is just riddled with companies that have taken advantage of us. We're going to the president has already directed each secretary or each director or DepSec in each one of these departments to start re-looking at those contracts. And he's going to use DOGE, and he's going to use his expertise, and he's going to use people in his area. And he put a lot of business people in front of these to start renegotiating contracts, even going back for current spending. At the same time, all these agencies that are non-authorized and all these programs that are non-authorized, we are not obligated to actually spend that money. Okay. Those cuts can continue to come out too, but we need to identify them in 25 because otherwise they'll be right back in 26.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of savings that can still be done at the same time, be able to get away from the past, be looking forward.
Well, and I mean, all of that sounds great, but it also sounds like all executive branch.
It is.
So what does Congress do within this period between now and then?
We got to codify it in law.
Okay.
Once it's already out there, we already appropriate the dollars. It's already out there.
So that's already out there. What this is about, but again,
that's where rescission comes into place.
Okay.
They send it to us. We vote on it. We make it into law where it can't be spent like that.
Does this work like a piece of legislation? Is someone submitting a bill or?
My understanding is once Congress picks it up, and we vote to not fund that program, then yes, it works like law. The president is leading from the front in this. He's in constant communication with us.
Yeah.
Senate, we meet 3 times a week and have fried chicken and Jell-O. I'm so tired of fried chicken. And I'm not over-exaggerating. There's really Jell-O every time. That's not a joke.
Yeah.
But every week the president has somebody from his administration and they're talking. Like today, we had Pete Hegseth in there talking. We'll have Susan Wiles in there. The president will come himself. Last week, JD came in. Or Vice President Vance came in. There's someone always there communicating, telling us what they're looking at and where they need us to move to.
Okay.
So by him leading in the front, there's no daylight between us. We know where everybody's moving and what's happening. And it really allows us to be able to move in a swift movement, all in the same boat. We're all in the same direction and making no ripples.
Okay. Now we get to September.
Yeah.
What do you think, and again, what do you think keeps people confident that once September comes around, we're not going to hear, okay, after the midterms? Because I'll be honest with you, I somebody I respect, and I was asking about, okay, when does Congress fulfill their end of the business here with the codification piece? And they're like, well, we got slim majorities. We might have to wait till after the midterm. And honestly, I about lost my mind. It was, you don't get... Look, I would love if we could get a full 4 years to do what we got, but I know we got 2.
That's all we got.
So what do you think keeps people motivated and accountable leading up to where when September comes, we can rely on the House and the Senate to be like, nope, it's time to get to work? Because I know what also happens in September, you start to get real close to the midterms, and now everybody in a tight district is like, well, so what do you think keeps people moving?
I think you hit the nail on the head. What keeps us accountable, actually, is the fact that we only had 2 years.
Okay.
It just, historically speaking, when you have a unified government coming in, you have the White House, you have both branches of Congress. I can't say both branches, both chambers of Congress. You have you just historically lose that in the midterm.
Yeah.
We all know that. That's not lost on us.
Okay.
Does that mean that we plan on doing it? No, we know that the only way we can do it is actually deliver for the American people.
Yeah.
And that is not lost on Leader Thune. That's why he's pushing so hard. We're running at a very aggressive schedule. Next week will be the first break we have up here since January 3rd.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because we got all the president's secretaries confirmed.
Yeah.
So the president's cabinet is pretty much intact, with the exception of Elise Stefanik, and the reason why she's not confirmed because they still need her vote in the House, and so she's made a very selfish decision.
Sure.
By staying put before she goes into the cabinet, and so but September 30th is going to be tough because we've already wasted. We should have been started working on FY26 October 1st.
Yeah.
Because it takes a while.
Yeah.
But since we've been dealing with this stupid CR for so long, we're 6 months into it. So now we've got to do our work in 6 months, which should have been a full year for us to do. It's going to be a monumental task to actually have all the appropriation bills done and voted on it by September 30th without having to do another CR. That's going to be the test. Because mind you, if we do a CR, now we're extending Biden's priorities into Trump's first fiscal year.
So let me ask you this: for everybody here that's, giving us a hearing, and saying, okay, I'm going to trust, but I want to be able to verify. What do they need to be watching the next several months leading up until September to give them a good indication that things are moving the way that we want them to?
First, start looking at committees.
Okay.
Committees, we have 12 appropriation bills. Start looking at the committees of jurisdiction and seeing if those appropriation bills are being sent out and then getting reported to APROPS. I'm on APROPS too. Yeah. Then APROPS has to report all those out by really, in order for us to even have a chance to do it. Yeah. We need to report it out by the end of July. You got to be tracking too. The House has to do the same thing. Yeah. So the House and Senate has to be doing the exact same thing. And the reason why is because we need them both out. Yep. So even though they may not be on the floor, what we call the four corners can start negotiating in the month of August, trying to get a deal to avoid a conference. Because once all those 12 bills are reported out of both chambers, then we go to the floor and both chambers have to vote on them. If both chambers go to vote on them, they're separate bills. Then they got to go to conference. The conference can last weeks. Weeks. So when you get back in August, when you get back after the August break, you only have 4 weeks to do all 12 appropriation bills. And if we don't have the month of August to negotiate, because even though we're on August break, it doesn't mean we're on August break. Sure. People say, well, it must be a month-long vacation. I'm like, I wish.
Do you ever have, like, I can't remember any time, and I realize state's different than federal, but I can't remember any time where we've had a House budget and a Senate budget that looked exactly the same. So there's always conference.
There's always, to a degree. So what does conference look like? Does the chambers go into official conference, or do they get them out of committee and start the conversations for conference? So what we have here is we have a president that's intimately involved in it. Okay. And so if there's anybody that can bring people together, like he brought the Freedom Caucus over on the CR, which is amazing. Yeah. The president, I talked about that, and I said, good luck. Never underestimate this guy. When you think he's out, he's going to come back. But with President Trump putting his team in place, working with us through the month of August without having a distraction of having House votes, having Senate votes, but allowing us and the appropriators to be up here, which is what will happen in the month of August, we'll be up here and we'll be working out all the differences along the way that they can look extremely similar. And when they go to the floor, we can vote on them. The House can vote on all 12 of those in one day. The Senate can't. Okay. The Senate will have to open it up for amendments. or we'll have to do what we call fill the tree, which is what Leader Thune can do. He can go and he can stack it where the Democrats can keep all their poison stuff out. Sometimes you negotiate and let them go have a few amendments on there because it's good. But really, once the deal is done, the deal is done. And that will be the only way we'll be able to get through the process of getting all 12 appropriation bills just through the Senate. Because each one has a set amount of hours that we got to debate on. And that's a process. So you got to have, not only you have debate, but you have to have the motion to proceed. Motion to proceed is a 30-day or 30-hour vote. Plus you have to, once you get it, well, actually, once it comes, this is just ridiculous, okay? Once it comes out of the committee, it gets reported to the floor.
Yeah.
So it gets reported on the floor. It has to set for 2 calendar days, not 48 hours. It can be reported on the 3rd at 11:59 p.m. and we can vote on it at 12:01 on the 5th.
Yeah.
But it has to set there. Then you have to have the motion proceed, which is a 30-hour debate, and then you have the motion to invoke cloture on, and that's a 30 hours. So that's 60 hours plus 2 days. Think about this. We have 12 of them to do. If they run the clock out on every one of them, it's impossible for us to actually do 12 just in the month of September, which is why we should have started this 6 months earlier.
Okay.
It's just the timing of it is very difficult. But it can be done.
Okay. And that's going to be a thing, because I think the biggest ask right now of a lot of people that are wondering why we can't move faster is, or the hope is like, okay, fine, September. But that's why I asked you that question. What do we need to be looking for now to make sure that September happens? Because anybody that's been involved in Republican politics for more than 5 minutes has been disappointed.
They all need to be reported to the Appropriation Committee, and the Appropriation Committee needs reporting to the floor, because once they get out of the committee, they got to go to the Appropriation Committee. Appropriation Committee then has to report them to the floor. So there's a 2-committee process that all 12
has to go through.
If we don't have those out by July 31st, then that is a very bad sign.
Okay.
I think we'll do it.
Okay.
Susan Collins, which I know some of your audience may not like. Susan, she's my chair of Approps, and she is extremely aggressive in this.
Okay.
And my deal about Susan, by the way, just for your listeners, is she's the best Republican we can possibly get out of Maine.
Well, the other thing
people need to realize that.
Well, here's the other thing I'll say is that. Look, I've served with people that ideologically, them and I are very, very different. But if you get them on the right committee, they do well. And we don't have problems. It's like I have colleagues of mine that if you put them on a gun committee, I would hate their guts, right? But you put them on a health and human services committee, I'm like, hey, you're great. You're great. Good. You stay there. So I get that.
That's where Susan is with Approps. I don't think you could probably have a better Approps chair, and I mean that sincerely, than Susan, because she just works hard. She communicates, and she believes in regular order. There's nothing more than she wants to deliver than to do all 12 probes. The reason why? Because she's the chair and she's up for re-election.
Yeah.
And so she wants to hand a win to Maine too.
Yeah. The reason why we've got to deal with this CR mess, and the reason why President Trump, the House Freedom Caucus, yourself and others are saying, look, we don't necessarily like, but it has to happen, is because you guys are dealing with fiscal year 25. A lot of this was set in place by the Biden administration. They front-loaded so much of the spending that the only way to kind of get this all dealt with and then move on to Trump-era budgets and spending is to do the CR, get this done. And then in September of next year, that's where all of a sudden we got this clean break, and now we can reorient all this spending, all this funding. In the meantime, what everybody should be watching for is 2 things. One, the executive branch continuing through DOGE in order to identify, quantify, and qualify all of the different spending that is going to be eligible for maybe rescission, as well as identify potential legislation to make the necessary proper changes going into fiscal year 26 that could prevent this bad stuff from happening in the future. In the meantime, we should be watching to make sure that the appropriations committees are getting their work done from the 12 different 12 different categories.
Press until right now.
Right there. Then I buy that right. Get that out. That needs to come out by July 31st. Would be a good indicator that we're in good shape to be able to move in and do exactly what's being promised in September. And in the meantime, We still have all the legislation that you typically would be carrying in order to, carry good bills for your constituents, and to be able to make some of the structural changes that we want to see within the federal government going forward. That among those, some of the ones that we should maybe be looking into, and maybe looking at things like Article 5 conventions, balanced budgets. If we can't get it as a constitutional amendment, at the very least, can we get it as part of regular order? And then
The president has said he wants it done.
yeah, and then
That's what he wants to do. So we'll deliver.
okay. All right. Well, I think that all gives us something.
I'm impressed. Because you're a lot smarter than you look.
Well, that's a low bar, man.
I'm just saying that was a lot to digest for you to comprehend and run that way. And the one thing that you got that I did leave out of it is that we have to work 2 calendars in the Senate. In the House, they only have to work 1.
Okay.
We have to work an executive calendar and a legislative calendar.
Okay.
And when we go back and forth, we have to have an agreement from the Democrats too to allow us to go back.
Gotcha.
We'll have to spend 80% of our time this year on the executive calendar. Mind you, we have worked at lightning speed for Senate
Yeah.
up here to get 21 confirmations already done.
Yeah.
We have 1,100 to do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just ambassadors are around 175 I'm using a round number.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each one of those ambassadors are a 2-hour debate. So we don't have a few that's another third, that's a 30-hour debate. So we're going to be moving back and forth in executive and legislative business.
And the Democrats don't have any incentive to help you speed up the process.
Zero incentive.
Yeah.
Which is what may happen in the CR.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about the CR, they technically run the CR.
Yeah.
If they wanted to use all their time on the CR, the House passes it tonight.
Yeah.
Right? We get it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have to let it soak, what I say. So it has to soak 2 days.
Yeah.
So we'll get it tomorrow. We'll file it. We can't vote on it until Friday. But technically, we have a 30-hour debate on the motion to proceed.
Yeah.
Then we have a 30-hour debate on invoking cloture. And then there's other procedure motions that they could technically run the clock on just a CR,
Okay.
just procedural until Tuesday.
Okay. Okay.
Put us into a shutdown. And they can do that on every funding bill.
So it's another thing to watch. It's another thing to watch of. Well, again, Senator Mullin, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for the explanations. To everyone, I hope you found this useful, potentially entertaining, but at least informative. And now the good news is that, look, regardless of how you feel about how things are progressing right now, there does seem to be a plan in place. Again, this is an administration that I'm willing to give more leeway and more trust to than I typically would. I do think we have some good people in Congress as well. But we still have that drop dead date where we can still pick up the pitchforks and the torches and do everything that needs to be done in order to, again, make the sort of changes that we all want to see, that we all voted for. So once again, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Senator Mullin. And
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Important question.
Yeah.
How much can you bet?
I don't know. Like
You're pretty thick.
Like
guy.
PR?
Not that thick. Yeah.
PR 350.
I picture you more than that. I'm ashamed. You're going more to.
I'm ashamed of myself too. But yeah, 350. What's yours?
Well, I don't want to brag.
Oh, you gonna go over 4?
405.
All right. Well, I got another go. I don't know. That sounds like federal inflation. I mean, but all right. Well, once again, thank you very much for your time. And we'll see you next episode.